topic of housing insecurity and homelessness in the college setting, I feel like it's so rarely talked about. But yeah, I know that so many people face it. I know it was not just me that was wondering, where am I going to stay during breaks? I would describe being homeless as being displaced, not having secure housing, particularly, not having your name on any lease. Maybe it could take the form, like in my experience, of like couch surfing, going from place to place, just not having a permanent place to call your home, or it could be living in your vehicle. It could be a lot of different things. My name is Amber, and I'm an English teacher in Hartford Public Schools. The people in my community and the way that they view homelessness and being housing insecure, it's difficult for me to say, because I know a lot of people in my community face homelessness and housing insecurity, and yet I also feel like, although it's very commonly faced in this community, because I live in Hartford and I've lived in the north end of Hartford, I lived in government housing, I lived in pretty impoverished areas, like a lot of the residents in Hartford are impoverished, so a lot of people I know face homelessness and housing insecurity. However, I feel like it is not often talked about because there's still a stigma behind it, even though it is so common. Homelessness has affected my life. Like I said, in many ways, a lot of people in this community face homelessness, face housing insecurity for like a variety of different reasons. My mom fought so hard for us to have secure housing, but it was very, very difficult, especially being impoverished. So luckily we were able to get into government housing, and that was a big change for us, although that came with its own, stigma. Like being in government housing, you have to very much follow their rules. You don't feel like the space is fully your own, where they can come in at any time to do inspections and things like that. My home was very much full of love, but at no fault of any of my family. It just wasn't very stable or safe just because of these very strict requirements placed when you're in government housing of any sort. Like even if you get something that's more flexible, like Section 8, there's still very much all these requirements. And you're kind of under a magnifying glass that very much does not make you feel safe and very much does not make you feel secure, especially because all these policies are constantly shifting and changing depending on the political landscape. When you rely on this, it's like very, very scary. So once I started college at 17, that's when kind of things became interesting with government housing, because I was still dependent with my mom, but I was still kind of like moving out. And the thing with government housing is they want as little people under the roof kind of as possible, as soon as possible. So there was a lot of pressure for me immediately to kind of be self-secure, self-sufficient. They didn't even seem to understand like me coming home for breaks. So what I did was I applied to be an RA, and I did get that position. And so I was an RA for about 3 years while I was at UConn, and that was a huge game changer for me, because I became an RA in the apartment specifically, so I was able to stay in the apartment throughout winter break. So that really alleviated at least like a lot for me. And then I could also stay in the apartment until the end of May. So that then left, I only had like kind of 2 months, ish, to kind of like figure out where I was going. And then usually over the summer they're like bridge programs. So I signed up to be like an SSS community leader, which is essentially kind of similar to being an RA. In March of 2020, I was a senior at UConn. And an RA still. And because of that, like my housing was of course tied to my job. And it was my understanding that I would have this housing until the end of May, that I would continue to get my RA stipend, right? Like there was no reason why that necessarily wouldn't be the case until the pandemic hit. But then this happened, and then we suddenly had a meeting with all the RAs, and our hall directors called us together being like, yeah, we don't know if people are going to keep living on campus. We really don't know what this means for your job or your housing situations, but in the meantime, just start contacting your parents and like let them know that there might be a possibility you have to like go home early. And it was the way they said that in the meeting, and like my heart just sunk, and I was so afraid. Because I couldn't figure something out that quickly. Like it was almost as if they treated like, oh, a student has a part-time job just for like extra money to like go out. And that's definitely the case for some people. But the reality for a lot of students is they're working and they're making money to survive, and they need housing because that's the only housing that they have. And that's really difficult, especially in the college level, because I feel as if it's like they're ignoring this entire population. And they're just literally assuming that every single college student like has a childhood bedroom and a safe place to fall back on. And that is very much not the case. there was this uncertainty for like a prolonged period of time. It was about like 2 weeks I was staying in my apartment, and I didn't know if I was gonna get kicked out the next day. It was really, really difficult because most of the campus at that time was empty, like it was evacuated, and there was only a few people who could apply for emergency housing. And it's so difficult, especially for the people who fought their way into college. And it's so hard, it's so difficult to get there. And it's like this additional barrier to stay, you know? Because it's so hard to focus on your academics when you don't even know, am I gonna have a place to stay in like a month, you know? And you have that countdown clock in your head, and it's like, I need to find a place to go. But then you have to also worry about midterms and finals on top of all that. It's like there's such a hard duality. Even though everyone should be entitled to a safe space, you feel like a burden for just needing literally walls and a roof and just a safe place to stay. So even when I did stay with people, I would, watch their kids. I would try to contribute as much as I possibly could, because just like existing in their space, I felt like such a burden. I struggled with my mental health before the pandemic, and it truly did not help, like being concerned about my housing, being in isolation, like the pandemic, all those factors together had a really negative effect on my mental health. I did not realize how much space it was occupying in my brain, how much it was weighing on me until I had secure housing. I couldn't even explain to you like the difference it made, which is like still very much struggling with my mental health and things like that. But the way you're able to then focus on other things and other aspects, like I couldn't even begin. Once your base needs are met, you're able to really tackle and focus on your well-being in every aspect. You know, your diet, your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health, all of that, because you have a space to do it. Like, how are you expected to do anything if you don't have space? Like, you could be going through things and you just can't bring that into school with you because of those very real reasons. Like, where you're kind of living this double life. But what happens at home, it stays at home, right? Like, what happens at home, it stays at home. And that's a really difficult mindset to even combat. And it's really difficult being an educator in this system, knowing that the system is flawed. You don't really have power over the overall systems. All you really have control over is your own classroom. So in your classroom, you create a safe space as much as you can, and you create a space where students can come to you as a trusted adult, dial 211 with them, and to try to get them those help and that resources. But like, once again, that's not always like, because 211 is so oversaturated, and there's also like not enough resources. It's very difficult. It's like you can spread this information that does help more people, but these systems, there's just not enough like support and resources there. So it's really hard. So you try to show up there every day and be the best you can for your students. There should be so much more for them. They deserve so much more, you know. But it's good to pass on that knowledge. Like, I shared it with all of my colleagues so that way they do know the signs, and with best intentions, you know, hopefully we can help more people. And I also pray over time that these systems and these resources improve, because they're not all they can be right now.